come and to worship the newborn king. And yet, like so many of us today, things didn't quite go as they were planned. And there were many unexpected turns on his journey. In the days when Caesar Augustus was the ruler of many kings, including Herod, who reigned in Jerusalem, there lived among the mountains of Persia a certain man named Artaban. Artaban was one of the Magi, men who studied the skies to find and discern the truth of God. He and 3 of his friends from far away had made a wonderful discovery. In the ancient writings of the Hebrews, they had found a promise that at a special time, a beautiful new star would rise in the eastern sky. At the rising of that perfect star, a great king would be born according to the signs. He would be the truth, sent from the one God. He would be the Son of the Most High. Artaban believed that the star's time had been very near, and so he sold his house and all that he owned in order to buy 3 jewels to carry with him to offer to the newborn king. Now, as the sun began to set, Artaban reached into his colorful tunic and brought out the 3 great gems. A sapphire as blue as the Persian sky at night. A ruby as red as the first rays of dawn. A pearl as white and as pure as snow on the mountaintops at moonlight. Artaban held the priceless gems together in his hands and gazed into the darkening sky. And it was then, right at that very moment, when he first saw the tiny spark on the horizon. He watched as it grew larger and larger, and as it rose higher and higher into the sky. Flashes of light surrounded the newborn star, gleaming with red, with blue, and the purest white. "It is the sign!" exclaimed Artaban. "The king is coming. I must go and meet him." Artaban's 3 Magi friends had said that they would wait for him only 10 days after they first sighted the star. And so Artaban knew that he must race in order to meet them at the Temple of Babylon, the place that they had agreed to gather at. If he did not race, they would be forced to leave and to seek the king without him. Artaban quickly saddled Vazda, his fastest horse, and he galloped off, barely stopping for food and drink along the way. He rode across brown mountain slopes and level green plains. He passed fields of nodding poppies and orchard of peaches and figs. He picked his way carefully over rocky mountain passes and crossed swirling, dangerous rivers. Poor Vazda was exhausted and could hardly walk as night fell on the 10th day. And yet Artaban knew that it was still 3 hours more until they could reach the place where they were to gather together with the other wise men. So he urged on his horse. But suddenly Vazda stopped, trembling in terror, and Artaban saw something in the road. He slid from his horse, and he approached the dark shape carefully. It was the body of a man. Artaban felt the man's forehead and listened for the sounds of breathing. The man seemed dead, but just as Artaban turned to go, the man groaned and reached out his hand and grasped after this tunic of the wise man's robe. The man was still alive. Artaban saw that without help, the man would not make it through the night. If Artaban nursed him, he would certainly recover eventually. But if he did so, then Artaban would be too late to meet his friends at the temple. What should he do? Artaban turned his eyes toward the star that he had been following, and he prayed, "O God of truth and life, show me the way of wisdom which only you know." And then he turned back to the sick man. Artaban gave him sips of cool water and mixed a healing potion from the bag, which all wise men kept with them at all times, and he gave this mixture to the man also. For several hours, Artaban cared for the man as he slowly regained his strength. Finally, the man awoke, and he asked, "Who are you?" And Artaban told him of his quest for the new king. "I have nothing to repay you for your kindness," said the man. "But I will tell you this, our Hebrew scriptures, our prophets have learned that the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, not in Jerusalem. That's where we must see him." Hurriedly thanking the man, Artaban dashed to his horse and galloped off towards the temple. Although Vazda fled over the ground like a gazelle, the sun's rays were shining as they finally entered the temple ground that morning. Artaban anxiously searched for his 3 friends, but they were nowhere to be found. Under a piece of brick, he found a note which read, "We have waited well past midnight, and we can delay no longer. We go to the king. Follow us. Follow us through the desert." Artaban sat on the ground and covered his head in despair. "How can I cross the desert with no food and an exhausted horse?" he cried. "I must return, sell my sapphire, and buy a camel and food for the journey. Only God knows whether I will lose my chance to find the king because I stopped to show this stranger kindness." And so it was that the other wise man sold his precious sapphire, bought a camel and supplies, and set out across the desolate desert. By day, the sun burned with terrible heat, and at night the winds whipped through his flowing robes. After many long weeks, Artaban finally arrived in Bethlehem. Searching through the town, he came upon a stone cottage, where inside he found a young woman rocking her baby to sleep. Artaban knocked at the open door, and the woman motioned for him to enter. Seating himself on a bench, Artaban told the woman of his 3 friends and the baby for whom he searched. The young mother listened, and then she nodded, and she said, "Yes, indeed, there were 3 strangers from the east who came, and who met with Mary and Joseph, and with their newborn child, and gave him precious gifts. But the strangers left suddenly last night, and Joseph and his family have disappeared. There is rumor of some impending danger, but no one knows of such a thing." Artaban's heart sank yet again. He had failed once more. Seeing his despair, the woman placed the baby in a cradle and rose to prepare a meal for the other wise man. Then suddenly there came the noise of a wild confusion and an uproar in the streets. Women screamed and men cried out. There was the clanging of swords and the clash of armor. Artaban ran to the doorway of the cottage as the woman snatched up her baby and cowered in the corner of the room. The soldiers of Herod are coming for our children!" Shouts filled the air as a towering centurion approached their tiny cottage. Artaban stood still, filling the doorway, and glared into the soldier's eyes. Then he slowly reached into his tunic and brought out the huge ruby, watching the soldier's face gleam with greed. "I'm all alone here," said Artaban, "and I am waiting to give this gem to the centurion who will leave me in peace." Quickly the soldier snatched the jewel, and turned and shouted to his men, "Move on, move on! There's no child here." The soldier continued down the street, leaving the other wise man and the grateful mother weak with relief. "O God of truth," Artaban prayed, forgive me for telling this lie and for giving to a man that which was to only be for you. Forgive me, O Lord. Will I ever be worthy enough to see the king?" Artaban prayed. But the woman in the shadows spoke softly over her sleeping child. "Because you have saved the life of me and my little one," she said, "may the Lord bless you and keep you all the days of your life." The next morning, Artaban decided to follow the baby king and his family into the land of Egypt. And And so he left Bethlehem and traveled on. And yet his task was not an easy one. Month after month, year after year, the other wise men searched diligently for the king. He traveled to the pyramids and to the great Sphinx, to the palaces of Pharaoh and to the river Nile. But always the answer was the same. Sorry, no king here other than Pharaoh. Although he did not find anyone to worship, he found many to help. He fed the hungry, and he clothed the naked, he cared for the sick, and he visited those who were in prison. Still, he carried the beautiful pearl close to his heart, hoping one day to present it to the one he continued to seek. After 33 years of searching, Artaban had grown very old and very tired. And so he decided to take one last trip to the temple in Jerusalem to worship the Lord and to die in peace. Arriving in the city, Artaban watched a shouting, pushing crowd work its way through the narrow streets. "What is this uproar?" he asked a shopkeeper. "Have you not heard?" the man replied. "Two famous robbers are to be crucified today, along with another man called Jesus, who claimed to be the Son of God. He was going to be executed because he said that he was the King of the Jews." Artaban's heart raced. Could it be that he had found his king at last? Perhaps if he hurried, he could arrive in time to offer his great pearl to the enemies of the king, so that he could rescue him, ransom him before he died. Gathering his robes about him, Artaban hurried up the dusty road. But just before he reached the top of the city gates, he was stopped by a troop of soldiers dragging a young girl. The girl was crying. Her hair and her dress were tangled and torn. Seeing Artaban, she cried out, "Have pity upon me, kind sir. My father died owing these men a great sum of money. I am to be sold as a slave to pay the debt. Please, please, save me from a fate worse than death." Artaban had missed his king twice now when he stopped to help others in trouble. He was so close to the end of the search, he could taste it. Could he give it all up now? But then he looked into the eyes of the helpless girl, and he knew one thing was certain, that rescuing her would be a true deed of love. And wasn't love the greatest gift of the one true God? Artaban took the last remaining gem he had, the pearl, and he placed it in the hand of the weeping girl. "This," he said, "this is your ransom, my child. It is the last of my treasures that was to be given to the king." Then, at that very moment, the sky darkened, and the echoing pearls and echoing peals of thunder rumbled through the streets of Jerusalem. The walls of the house rocked to and fro as the earth rolled like the waves of the sea. The soldiers fled in terror, leaving Artaban and the girl alone. Suddenly, a heavy section of the roof tile broke loose and crashed down upon the other wise man. As Artaban fell to the ground, he heard a quiet, yet insistent voice speak to him over the thunder. "Artaban, Artaban," the voice called softly. "You have been good, and you have been a faithful servant. I was hungry, and you fed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Come now to the rest prepared for you." Not so, Lord," whispered Artaban with the last of his strength. When did I do these things for you?" And then the voice answered, "Whenever you helped one of the least of these, my people in need, you helped me." Slowly, the peace and the joy of understanding fell upon Artaban's soul like a gentle rain, and he grinned broadly. His journey on earth was ended. His treasure was accepted. The other wise man had finally found the king. so, the story of Artaban